All right, welcome. So as we proceed throughout the webinar, please go ahead and type in questions in the text box. On the left side, you'll see the text box area. I'll be your moderator, so if there's anything you need, you can chat me directly, or else you can just chat to the room. If you have questions, go ahead and type them in there as well, and Chris will be watching that, and I'll be watching that, and we'll make sure that those questions get answered either during or during the question and answered portion of the webinar. All right, so I'll be the moderator, and Chris Ditzler is our Senior Instructional Designer. She is currently working on her PhD with research in creativity, innovation, and web use in the classroom. So with that, Chris, we will pass this over to you.
Thanks, Kody. Well, welcome everybody to our seminar today. Our topic is congratulations, you've survived the first few weeks of your online course. I know that a lot of times, having taught online, once you get through the first week or two, you get to that point where it's like, okay, how am I going to get my students, keep them engaged? What do I do next? Our agenda today is going to work. We'll talk about, I'll introduce the topic, and then we'll talk about how to create a community of learning, the importance of timely feedback, strategies for student retention, how to maintain your online presence, and then we'll have a question and answer session. However, as we go throughout this webinar, as Kody said earlier, please feel free to go ahead and type any questions, comments, anything that you'd like to throw in there into the chat box, and we'll address them as they come up. He'll be monitoring the chat box, as will I. So let's go ahead and get started. As I said a few moments ago, the first 2 weeks of an online class, you know, there's all these things going on. You're getting your textbooks, students are adding and dropping, you've got introductions, there's all of the, just getting the students basically settled. And in the fall semester, it's always a little bit tricky because we start and we have 1 week of class and then we have Labor Day. And so the first 2 weeks are caught up with the holiday and everything else, which adds an additional element of craziness to the online classroom. In the spring, we usually start after Martin Luther King Day, so we don't have that break, but the fall is a little challenging. So you get through the first 2 weeks. The students are in the, hopefully you have an introduction discussion in the classroom. They're in there. They're getting to know each other a little bit. You're getting to know them a little bit. They're getting their textbooks. They maybe read the first chapter, become a little bit familiar with the topic of your course. And then what do you do? After week 3, where do you go from there? How do you get the students truly engaged in the content? 3 areas that we're going to talk about today in order to make that happen involve interaction, student-to-student interaction, student-to-teacher interaction, and student-to-content interaction. The first thing is student-to-student interaction. How do you create a community of learning? We'll talk in a few moments about ways that we can do that, but what is it? What's a community of learning? According to an article, actually a book chapter written by Anderson, he says the community-centered lens allows us to include the critical social component of learning in our online course and our online learning designs. It's very important in the online classroom when students are feeling a lack of the same face-to-face connection that they have in a seated classroom to give them the social cognition, give them the means to work together, to communicate with those who learn together, and to learn from each other. And those are all elements that are going to create that community of learning. With the community of learning, you have the largest piece is the student-to-student interaction. You do that, a social presence. For example, you can have a chat room. You can use discussion. Any online classroom should have discussion. There should be a discussion amongst the students where the instructor is involved in it, but the students are talking to one another. One really good practice, one of the best practices is to have like a water cooler or an internet cafe or whatever you want to call your discussion. For example, when I'm teaching, Europe, a course on European history, I'll have a discussion that's called the League of Nations or the United Nations, or something that ties into the theme of the course. And that's their area where if they want to talk about the football game, they can. If they want to talk about the content and have questions for each other, they can do that there too. And in addition to that, having weekly discussions or modular discussions on each topic area is also a key to building that social learning presence. Having a water cooler is a social presence. Having topic discussions that are based on readings, that are based on other resources, other content material, is to build that learning area. One of the areas that I have a great deal of interest in, that a lot of my research is in, deals with web tools and social media and creativity in the classroom. And one of the theories that I look at a lot, that I read a lot about, is connectivism. Sue, are you the only? Does everybody else only see the welcome slide?
Yeah, I see the agenda.
Uh-huh.
At the top, next to the slide, do you have a little check where it says follow? Is that little box checked?
Because mine is showing the community of learning slide.
Go ahead and check the little box at the top right below where the where it says slides, whatever the slide number is, and then there's a follow. Do you see that little box?
Mm-mm.
Up at the top where it says load content. Do you see that?
Yeah,
Okay,
the information one.
Yeah, and then to the right it says recording, and then right below that there's not something that says follow with a little check.
No, it doesn't. I don't have that. Do you want to go to the slide? Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I clicked follow.
It's not giving me the follow option for some reason.
Oh, that's strange. I can click for you.
Okay. Next slide.
Yeah, you can just say next slide, and I'll do that.
Well, you're on the right slide now. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know, Sue. But anyways, to go back, connectivism is the idea of students and their peers creating their own knowledge. And that's what the content that you as the instructor provide them, being able to take all of these elements together, be it textbook reading, article readings, if they're watching videos, if they're going to other web pages, other sources, wherever their content that you are directing them to, for them to make connections. Make connections in their lives, in their knowledge base, reformulating their knowledge base, and bringing that material that's pertinent to them and sharing that with their peers in the classroom. All of these things are part of that community of learning. In the world today, with social media as prevalent as it is, Pew Research shows that something like 96% of all teenagers have access to a computer in some way or another. And they're engaging in this social media, be it Twitter, be it Facebook. Facebook, of course, is a really big one. And they're creating what's called a personal learning a personal learning environment, a PLE. To show you, can you go to the next slide, please, Kody? To show you what a PLE looks like, this is just a concept map of the pieces. You create a personal learning environment, and you're constructing knowledge, you're sharing documents, you're building wikis together, you are in discussions, you're using other web tools, you use web tools, YouTube, you have networks, blogs. All of these pieces come together that help these students take the content that you are sharing with them and constructing this new knowledge from all of these areas that are social media, in addition to what they're sharing with each other. And it's kind of interesting, depending on what kind of course you're teaching. If it is a course where there's a lot of diversity in majors, every one of those students is bringing a whole new spectrum of knowledge into the classroom that they can share with one another. We all have different perspectives. And so to not give them that opportunity to engage in that community of learning limits how much knowledge they can construct. Can you go to the next one, please, Kody? The second item that is on our agenda is feedback, timely feedback. What is timely feedback? When you're looking at feedback, if your student emails you and you don't return their email for 3 or 4 or 5 days, that really would not be considered timely. If you get assignments turned in, papers or quizzes or what have you, and you don't give them any feedback on it at all, or it's limited, or it takes 4 or 5 weeks to grade it, then that's not necessarily timely either. I've seen cases in the past where students are not getting feedback on assignments, or they're not getting grades back on assignments, and by the time they realize that they're not doing as well as they had hoped, they're already so deeply into the semester that it's very difficult for them to get back on track. So timely feedback is very important. A couple of things about feedback that is timely to the students is it tells the students that you care about their success. It tells them that you are there, that you have a presence in the classroom, that you have a vested interest in them completing their assignments and doing well in your course so they can go on to the next one. One of the elements of feedback is your contact information. If students can't get a hold of you, then they can't get feedback from you. When you're looking at contact information, some people provide many avenues of contact. Many instructors like to keep the email within Web Campus, which is nice because in Web Campus everything stays there. If it goes to your outside email account, then it may or may not stay there. But in Web Campus it does, and you can always save it for later. Having office hours listed, and it could just be by an appointment or by a chat, having clear expectations given to the student. If you email me, I will get back with you within 24 hours, 48 hours. I will get back with you within 24 hours during the week, but on the weekends I'll wait till Monday. If you let them know that is what the expectation is, and that's when they can get feedback from you, then they generally are happy with that because they know what they can expect. If you get assignments from them and you say, I will get your papers back to you within a week, students will consider that fair because they know what the expectation is. They know what they can expect from you. And for a student, when it comes to feedback, knowing what they can expect from you is essential to them feeling like you have that interest in their success. Kody, can you go to the next one, please? Thank you. Student retention is an important element in the online classroom. When you're looking at retention in any university or any classroom, it becomes an issue. That first 2 weeks, as I said when we very first started, those first 2 weeks people are coming and they're going, there's ads, there's drops, there's all of these things. But after the third week, students should know if they're going to stay in your class or not. And they should be settled into your class. So if you look in your grade book and you have 25 students, you could probably expect to have 23 to 25 by the time you post your final grades. There'll be one or two who might drop for various reasons throughout the semester, but generally that's pretty set. When you're dealing with student retention, we go back to those 3 interactions that I talked about at the very beginning. Student to student, building that learning community. Student to teacher, having that feedback for them. And then the student to content. Engaging your students in content. If you have a classroom that has no content or is missing any one of these 3 interactions, then the chances of retention diminishes. Having engagement. If you have your students in discussions, if they feel like that they have ownership of their content, that they're learning, that you're there for them, that their peers are there for them, their interest in logging into the classroom is higher. If you have closed-ended discussions, for example, I don't know, a closed-ended question like, what year did World War II start? Every student can say 1939, and that's the end of that discussion. However, if you put open-ended questions that encourage engagement between students, then the likelihood that they're going to return to that discussion and see what their peers are saying and respond to them is higher. In addition to that, if you require the students to respond to one another, then that engagement increases. If they have to go into the discussion and post one time during the week and have no other interaction with the students, chances are they probably won't. And in addition to that, if you don't attach some kind of grade to those discussions and so forth, the likelihood that they're going to engage in discussion does diminish. So it's important to have that engagement with the students and that interaction. You can do small groups, and that increases the interaction. It makes it a little bit more personal among students, especially if you have a course that has, there's courses, especially lower level, 101 courses that have 100+ students. Breaking them into groups so there's a little bit more of an intimate setting for them in discussion is helpful as well. Having engaging content. If you have content that is pages and pages of Word documents to read or simply the textbook to read, it's not going to engage them so much. If you have things that are activities and checks for understanding and websites to go to and videos to watch, all of these other pieces, these media pieces that you can include within the content, then it makes it more engaging to them. If you're talking about a concept, I'll give you an example. There's a course that I've worked on here as an instructional designer for a while, for a couple of years. It's been a course that I've worked on, and one of the areas talks about Sharia law, and there's this whole text document that the students can read. But to make sure that it's more engaging, the instructor has a link to some of the films that we have available through Films on Demand that are interviews with people who live under Sharia law, and it makes it alive for them. And the students truly enjoy that element in addition. If you want to have interactions so that students can do checks for understanding so that they can have more, almost like a content-driven game that they can engage in, talk to your instructional designer. We are more than happy to help you with that. We have a whole design team that can work with you to make that happen. And it makes your content more engaging, and it keeps your students in that classroom. An important element in the online classroom is the sense of belonging. Your students need to feel like they belong and that they're included, not that they're off, living in Elko and are totally disconnected from the UNLV experience. Keeping those interactions going, keeping the student interaction going, your interaction with them going, sharing information about UNLV, making sure that they have information about the Academic Success Center, the library services, all of those things gives them a sense of inclusion in the UNLV community. And you do want to encourage that because that makes that student feel like they belong and want to stay. Diversity of online students is another element to bear in mind. Some of your students are 65, 70, some are 18, 19 years old. Having the ability, having discussions or interactions that allows them to share and find a common ground within the content of the course is something that gives them another sense of belonging and inclusion. There are some courses that, you can really balance those that are older and those that are younger, or those that come from one walk of life or another walk of life, or somebody who comes from a different culture compared to somebody who was raised in Las Vegas. If you have introductions in the classroom and you get to know a little bit about those students, you can construct your discussion questions to be all-inclusive. The last 2 points I want to talk about here with retention, the lost student. Week 3, week 4, there are students who just kind of disappear off your radar. They're not in the discussion. When you grade your discussion or you look at the assignments, they don't submit anything. What do? Do you just say, oh well, they're gone? Or if they're still registered for the class, do you shoot them an email? Do you try to contact them? Hey, I haven't seen you in the classroom. Where are you? What happened? They could have something going on in their lives that keeps them from coming into the classroom, or they might be choosing to drop. But if you make that contact, it gives them a sense of belonging in that classroom as well, and that you care about what is happening to them. And the final point is availability. Be available to your students. The more that they feel like you are interested in them as your student, the more likely they will be to stay in that classroom. Your online presence, maintaining your online presence. A lot of things, this is again that interaction. This is the student to teacher interaction. Let your students know you're there. Make announcements. Make announcements every few days. And if you can't go into the online classroom to post an announcement, Web Campus allows you to post them ahead of time so that they can release on specific dates. At least that gives the students a sense that you came into the classroom and that you are checking on them and that you're paying attention to them. Discussion interaction. Do you have to respond to every single discussion post? No, because a lot of times that's not even possible. When you have hundreds of discussion posts, it is very time consuming. But read through the discussions and make one post to the group and let them know that you're in there, that you've read the discussion. Send emails every now and then. If there's something going on, you see an interesting news story that is pertinent to your topic, there's something happening in your field that is interesting, shoot them an email. Post office hours. Let them know how to get a hold of you. Use the chat if you wish. Skype. Some instructors Skype. I personally don't use Skype in my classroom, but I know that it's effective for some. And if that's something that you already use, that would be a great tool to use. And any other means that you have to let them know that you're in there. Again, it goes back to the timely feedback. It goes back to making sure that you are showing them that you have an interest in them. Every one of these pieces ties together. All of these interactions are tying together. The online presence, the retention, all of these things come together to make your classroom successful. And when you are engaging with those students, your experience as an online instructor is much more fulfilling as well. And like I said, sometimes you have large groups. Some courses do have 100 students, and it's hard to really get to know every single one of them, but you'll get to know a sense of that group. You'll get to know every classroom, as I'm sure you know from teaching for a while, every classroom has its own personality, and that comes through the online classroom, but it comes through your presence there and you engaging those students. And so with that, I think I'm going to close with a quote that I think is of interest. Kody, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Sufficient levels of deep and meaningful learning can be developed as long as one of the three forms of interaction, student-teacher, student-student, student-content, is at very high levels. The article that I took this from is actually on the resources on this PowerPoint that you can see in the archive as this is being recorded. Keep those interactions going. Keep every element of the interaction going, and begin in week 3. Like I said, with week 1 and week 2, there's all these the textbooks and the adds and drops and all that craziness going on. But in week 3 is where you really, really need to start building those forms of interaction that are going to carry through until the 15 weeks in the final exam. If you keep those going in your classroom, then your students will be far more successful and you will enjoy that online classroom a lot more. And so I'm going to go on and throw it out there for questions. If anybody has any, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. If you have a microphone, you can go ahead and use your microphone as well.
Hi, Chris. I just wanted to know if you can hear me. I'm actually participating in...
I can.
Oh, that's great. I'm actually participating in this webinar through an iPhone. So, interestingly...
I see your little iPhone icon.
Yes. Oh, cool. Well, it doesn't provide me the opportunity to type anything in the chat box, but I have been able to participate in hearing exactly what you're saying and seeing what you're presenting, and now even being able to communicate directly through an iPhone completely. So it's pretty cool. I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, I think that's exciting, a new element. Every time we do one of these webinars, there's always a little new element that comes in there, and so that's a great one. Pascal, I see your question about good discussion question types. It really depends on your
spring courses.
That really depends on what your subject is.
That's a question.
When you're looking at discussion questions, open-ended discussions are really the ones that are going to keep that dialogue going between the students. Something where the students can have a different take on it. I don't know, what do you teach? Visual effects for film. Oh, see that would be a fascinating class, visual effects for film. You could do a question on, like, I don't really know anything about visual effects for film. However, if you did a question on you know, there's this kind of effect. Name a film that you saw this in and explain why you found that interesting. Every student would have a different That is a good question. Artist working conditions. Yeah. See? And were the students particularly engaged when you had that question? Yeah. And like I said, like Kody says, you know, with the best ones are which every student's response will vary. And if you're taking it off a reading and making them give personal examples or give examples that they've seen or that they saw in the news or that they had read about or heard about, you will get differing viewpoints. And so I think that anytime you're looking at discussion questions, trying to find something that doesn't have a yes or no answer. I know I'm kind of going around circles. I'm not trying to, I apologize. But anything that doesn't have one specific answer. If I can say yes or no to a question, then it is not going to be a good discussion question. Shauna, that's a good example too. Showing and then having them follow with their thoughts. Another technique that I've seen used effectively in discussion is have the discussion broken up into groups of like 3 or 4, and then having the groups each present what they came up with, or giving each group a different question and then bringing them back together and having them share what they learned in their group on that particular question. All this video production, I stuck with history. But I think that as an instructor, you know your content better than anybody, and so the key is any of this engagement that you have with your students is really kind of thinking outside the box and thinking of ways that the students can make the information personal to them. I know, I need to take this class too. It sounds really interesting. So, does anybody else have any questions? Shauna, are there any questions I could answer for you? Oh, we have a number of webinars, and we try to have every couple weeks a different webinar, and we send out the announcements, and your instructional designer will send you the announcements to it. And there are some about technical uses of Web Campus. I believe there's one coming up about the gradebook pretty soon. Rex, is that one coming up soon? Next Wednesday. Okay, so next Wednesday we do have a webinar, and you can go register for that. That is using the gradebook, which is a technical use of Web Campus, and there's also tools in Web Campus. Yeah, the gradebook is one that gets a little snarky sometimes. So learning how to use it, and Rex will do a great job showing you how he knows it inside and outside. And so. Yeah. No problem. Any other questions I can answer today? Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. Kody, if you want to go ahead, these are the resources for the material that I had. Some of the resources, and there is a link to send you so that you can give us some feedback on the webinar that you joined today, and that's on the next slide after that. So if you could click on that and go ahead and fill out that survey, we would very much appreciate it. And again, thank you for coming. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in another webinar very soon. Thank you, Kody, so much for being my moderator.